Well, hello to everyone, whether you are in Odenton or online, in the auditorium or the chapel. Thank you for being a part of the Bay Area family. My name's Aaron. I'm one of the pastors here. And today I am wearing, at the moment, some stickers of some people that are meaningful to me, kids ministry volunteers that are investing in my kids that I'm so grateful for. And you'll see these stickers around today. If you see somebody with a kids ministry t-shirt on, make sure you thank them. We're so grateful for what they do. That is not childcare. That is ministry that we are super thankful for. So yeah, we love that team. Now, Andy and Matt and Christian and Lisa and Paige can all stare at me while I give this sermon. All right, there we go. That's their literal faces. That might be a little disturbing. We'll see how it goes. Okay. But anyway, we're finishing up Esther, and just like we saw with that video, the invisible hand of the artist bringing something together, even though the artist can't be seen. That's what we've seen in Esther, is God's invisible hand. Even though he's not mentioned in the book, he is sovereignly ordaining all that occurs in it. And there's been a lot of interesting things, and I hope to get to some principles we can all learn together. But as we're starting off this morning, I know for me, I love a story with a twist ending. I don't know if you're like this, but where all of your expectations are turned upside down. Like some authors and directors are famous for this. I think of Agatha Christie or O. Henry, right? Short stories. Or director M. Night Shyamalan, somebody who known for surprising you. Now, this is kind of the opposite effect of the Hallmark movie, where everything is predictable, right? You don't even need to start the film. You can just look at the title, and you already know how this is going to end. And I got to be honest, I love them. I can't get enough of them. My wife and I, it's so comforting. I mean, you start the movie and you're like, I already know that there's going to be a snowstorm. City Slicker's going to get stuck in the hotel. They're going to lose signal with their fiance, and they're really going to fall in love with the country bumpkin. It's just like, I love it. So good. You can't beat it. I don't think one's been made in the last decade we haven't seen, okay? So every time Christmas time, there's more. They might be the same one over and over. I wouldn't know but it's just so comforting. My life has enough twists in it. But I do like occasionally to be surprised by good writing and things. But but one of the more iconic twist endings, I think, is the movie The Sixth Sense, if you've seen The Sixth Sense. I'm not a big movie guy talking about, well, other than Hallmark movies, if those count, but talking about movies can be a little risky, but this one's pretty famous at this point, came out in 1999. I am going to give a spoiler, but if it took you a quarter of a century to see this movie, that's on you. So, anyway. The main character, Bruce Willis, he's a child psychologist working with a child whose struggle is that he sees dead people. And the big twist at the end, if you don't want to hear, close your ears, is that Bruce Willis turns out to be dead. He's one of the dead people, right? If you didn't know that, you're like, what? It'll still be good. Anyway. But it's a full reversal of what you're expecting. And today we're closing out the book of Esther, and really it's a story with complete reversals as well. Everything that seemed upside down in the story is turned right side up. We're left with our heads spinning, wondering how could this have all come together? Arguably, I think the main theme of Esther is the idea of reversal. In fact, there's something of a secret thesis statement that's buried in chapter 9, verse 1. There's this little phrase that I think could be the thesis. It's that the reverse occurred. The reverse occurred. In the final chapters of this book, you could put that phrase 100 times. That what was planned, but the reverse occurred. You were expecting, but the reverse occurred. Here's what you were led to believe, but the reverse occurred. It's a masterfully told story. I would encourage you sometime, take a week and use your Bible reading to just read this story a few times over and over. That theme of reversal is woven deep into the details. But this morning, I just want to show you 3 reversals that close out the backbone of the story, and we'll see how it all plays out. Okay, the 3 reversals are related to Haman. This is the big bad guy. Haman's stuff, Haman's edict, and Haman's day. We'll find all 3 of those experience a full reversal. But let me give you a recap so that we can be caught up to where we've been. The story of Esther is about a crazy Persian king who kicks out his beautiful wife and decides to hold a beauty contest to get a new queen. And he picks an orphaned Jewish girl from the capital city to be his new queen. Her name is Esther. And her father figure, named Mordecai, who works near the palace, ends up making the king's right-hand man very mad. That guy's name is Haman, and Haman is a very bad dude. So he convinces the king to issue an edict to kill all of the Jews in all of the empire, and the king is dumb, and so he agrees with the edict. And Esther ends up stepping up to the plate. She risks her life, and she gets Haman in trouble for trying to kill all the Jews, of which she is one. And as a punishment, and at a very poetic reversal in itself, the king agrees that Haman has done wrong. He kills Haman, but he kills him on Haman's own homemade revenge machine that he had created for Mordecai. But he dies on it himself, and there was much rejoicing. Okay. That's where we left off last week. It ends with the fact that Haman is real bad, but he is now real dead. So the problem is solved, right? No, it's not solved. That's because the bad guy is dead, but the bad edict, his command to kill everyone, it lives on. So how is it that the people of God are going to be saved? I'm glad you asked. Let's look at the series of reversals and see how it all comes together. The first reversal is about Haman, the bad guy's stuff. Haman's stuff is about to become Esther's stuff, and we'll see how that happens beginning in chapter 8, verse 1. Here's what it says. On that day, King Headache, as he was nicknamed, gave to Queen Esther, what did he give her? He gave her the house of Haman, who was the enemy of the Jews. She gets his house, which is like his whole estate. Everything that belongs to Haman, all of his wealth, was handed over to Esther on the same day he died. It does not get stuck with legal. It's not tied up in probate. It is all Esther's right now. So what does she do with this newfound opportunity? Well, she grabs Mordecai and brings him along for the ride of this opportunity. She explains to the king that Mordecai is like a father figure to her, and he hears that. And so what does he do? Well, he jumps on and adds more reversal to the story. What he does is the king took off his signet ring, which he had given to Haman and then took from Haman when he killed him, and he gave that ring to Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. This ring is like the master key to the kingdom. With this ring, Mordecai can make official proclamations with no oversight from the king whatsoever. Haman used to have this ring. Haman's now dead. Mordecai now has it. It's a complete reversal of events. And to top it off, Esther says, hey, you can have control of all of Haman's stuff too. So now Haman's house, Haman's wealth, Haman's power, Haman's job, all of it now belongs to none other than the son of Kish, Mordecai, his generational arch nemesis. This, for Mordecai and Esther, is like a total booyah moment. He's like, do a little dance. Yeah, Like, he just massively won over Haman in every possible way. But then there's going to be more dancing. Just get ready for it. But then they got to snap back to reality in this moment because, yes, Haman's dead, but his edict is not. And they've only got 8 months before the day comes that all Persian citizens will be able to legally murder their Jewish neighbors and coworkers and then take all of their stuff. And so that's where we get to our next reversal. Okay? So Haman's stuff has become Esther and Mordecai's stuff. What are we going to do about Haman's edict? Well, what happens is that Esther has to go back before the king and ask for another favor. But she's feeling the burn at this point. Her demeanor, we'll see her wording gives it away. She knows this proposal is risky. She's going back to the well, possibly for one too many times. And here's how she says it in Esther chapter 8, starting in verse 3. She fell at his feet. This is the king. She falls at his feet, and she wept. And she pleaded with him to avert the evil plan of Haman the Agagite. And she said, well, if it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and if the thing seems right before the king, and if I am pleasing in his eyes, which pleasing in his eyes is like, if you like what you're seeing, that's what she's saying here. All of these if, groveling, recognizing the king has already done quite a bit for her. This is potentially just another failure point in her plan to rescue the people. And if all this is true, here's what she asks for. She says, let an order be written to revoke or to repeal the letters devised by Haman the Agagite. This is interesting. Esther is asking for something that she knows cannot happen in this kingdom. She has asked the king to take a ruling that he has already issued. She's asking for it to be revoked or repealed, just be totally reversed to make it null and void. But culturally, this is a non-starter. Okay, if you read the book of Esther, you'll see it multiple times says that the laws of the Medes and the Persians cannot be revoked. They don't do that. They don't change the rules. If they said it, they mean it. Even if it's dumb, they don't repeal their laws. They just counterbalance them. Okay? And the king is definitely a little bit annoyed with this request. Scholars agree that his tone in verse 7 is a little bit like, look here, missy. Here's what he says in verse 7. He says, behold, I've given Esther the house of Haman. I already gave you all the guy's stuff, and they've hanged him on the gallows. I already killed the man for you because he intended to lay hands on the Jews. He's like, look, what more do you want from me? I killed him and I gave him all your stuff. But he kind of huffs and puffs, and he's like, whoa, fine, just, you know what? Do whatever you want and just make this problem go away. Here's how he says it in verse 8. He's like, but you may write as you please with regard to the Jews in the name of the king and seal it with the king's ring. He's over it. He's just saying, here's a blank check. Go fix it. And this is so classic Xerxes. I mean, he's completely careless with this ring. He's just handing over the power. Which this would be like the president just walking around, handing out the nuke codes. Like, you get a football, and you get the football, and then you get. That's a very bad idea. Okay. But it's very reckless. But we're not mad about it right now because it's actually working to the benefit of the Jewish people. Because now Mordecai is fully free to issue an edict to save his people. And he can word it however he wants. Okay. So what does he come up with? Well, he essentially does Control-C, Control-V, copy-paste, or Command-C, Command-V for all you Mac users, okay? He copies and pastes Haman's edict from 2 months earlier, and then he just reverses the details of it. I mean, if you read it, it's literally almost word for word the same edict, but opposite. So another edict is going to go out from the desk of the king with the king's seal, from the king's messengers, from the king's right-hand man, but this time his right-hand man is Mordecai, and it's a full reversal of all of Haman's writing. Here's how it read in chapter 8, verse 11. It said, the king allowed the Jews who were in every city to what? They could gather and defend their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any people or province that might attack them, children and women included, and to plunder their goods. Interesting. On one day throughout all the provinces of King Headache on the 13th day of the 12th month. Okay, notice a few things here. First of all, this is very clearly self-defense. The people are bunkering down, they are armoring up, they're preparing to fight back. And this date here at the end, that's 8 months into the future. They've got some time to prepare. I kind of like to picture them preparing for this moment like Home Alone style, with a bunch of traps laid out around the house and stuff like that. It's not in the original. That's how I like to picture it. But I bet somebody did that. But also notice that they are allowed to plunder their enemies. Again, this is a full reversal of what Haman wrote about the Israelites. That's fascinating. So what happens in terms of the reversal is that Haman's edict has just become Mordecai's edict, written by the arch nemesis of the Agagite, the son of Kish. Once again, another little dance party moment of yeah, we're winning, yeah, we're gonna win. That's the dance that he did in the original. So they're winning in every possible way right now. So I guess the question becomes, how did it go? What happens when the actual death day, the 13th day of the 12th month, what happens when that arrives? Well, that's where we get the reversal of Haman's day. In the days leading up to this, and especially the last month or so, people are freaking out because of all that's going on. In fact, some people are literally becoming Jewish. 3 days before, everyone's like, no, I'm not Jewish. I don't know what you're talking about. And then the new edict comes out oh, yeah, that's me. I'm converting. I'm Jewish now. And okay, it's this hilarious moment where people are flocking to identify with the group that's now in power. People are converting all over the place. And then the day finally arrives, the 13th day of the 12th month. And in the writing of the story, it sort of drives off a cliff. It actually becomes kind of bland. I would be hoping for some battle scenes with epic defenders, guys taking down 10 people at once with 1,000,000 swords. That's kind of what you're expecting, the way it's been written so far, but it's not. It's like a reporter live tweeting. It's very bland. It's just the details. And on the 13th day of the 12th month, we're recorded what happens. Across the empire, over 75,000 people joined together in an attempted murder party. and all of them die in the process because the Israelites defend themselves. Included in the dead are Haman's 10 sons. And amazingly, we aren't told about any Jewish casualties on this day. There are 0. But the fighting turns out to not be done because apparently a group of Haman's loyal followers, they plan to delay their attack by 1 day to sort of catch the Jewish people by surprise. Esther finds out about this. She asks the king for an extension, like 24 more hours to defend themselves in the city of Susa. He says, thumbs up, go for it. And they successfully repel another 300 armed attackers the following day. This is a massive success. The threat has been eliminated. After 48 hours of trauma and fear and fighting, God's people have been delivered. So what are they going to do now, like with their big win? Well, if we remember what the edicts said, they had permission to go and steal the stuff of all the people who just attacked them. So, you would think they're going to go have a looting party, like it's legal. But it turns out, we're told 3 different times that they took nothing from their attackers. Nothing. Which is pretty astounding given that, again, that it was allowed. But what it shows, again, is that the Jewish people's motive was self-defense. Unlike their neighbors who were willing to murder for their greed, Israelites were acting in self-defense. So if they're not going to steal everybody's stuff, which they were allowed to do, what do? They do what I think we might expect them to do. They throw a huge party. And that makes perfect sense. Because this is a day that they have been dreading, and not only is it over, they've defeated their enemies, and they're feeling awesome about it. I mean, for us, think about it this way. Imagine if culturally we knew that December the 7th, 1941 was coming in advance. We knew Pearl Harbor was going to happen. Or we knew in advance that 9/11 was going to happen. We knew it was coming, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. But then, all of a sudden, what was going to be a day of mourning and loss is suddenly like the 4th of July. Like it would have been amazing. We would have the biggest fireworks of all time. What a reversal. What a win. So the Israelites, they don't want to celebrate this thing just once. They want to celebrate this day forever. And the party that they throw and the official holiday that it subsequently becomes for the Jewish people, it signals our final reversal. Because on the 13th day of the 12th month, that day, it was the hand-picked day of Haman. He and his spiritual advisors, they had spent forever rolling the dice, discerning the signs, picking the luckiest possible day when all the stars would align and Haman would be granted success by the gods. That he would finally be able to become famous. It was the perfect day where Haman would become known for finally destroying the Israelites. It was his day. And at some level, the astrologers and his advisors, they nailed it. The day did become very famous. But it became famous as the day that Israel was delivered, not the day they were destroyed. Haman's lucky day becomes Esther's festival. That's what it's known for. It was supposed to be his day. Now it's her festival. And Mordecai and Esther, they decide to make this thing official. They send a letter to all the Jews in all of Persia. And they say, hey, this is a law. Everyone, set aside these same days every year as a holiday. A time for feasting and rejoicing and remembering. What are they going to remember? They're going to remember that the reverse occurred. The reverse occurred. This holiday is all about the fact that there was a 180-degree change, a change that changed the course of the people of God forever. And the Jewish people love this. They're loving this law. In chapter 9:27, they firmly obligated themselves and their offspring and all who joined them that without fail they would party. They would keep these 2 days according to what was written and at the time appointed every year. They're going to have a party and they will not fail to do it. And what would they call this special holiday? What would they call the Festival of Reversal? Well, they came up with a brilliantly ironic name. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. If it were fiction, you wouldn't have come up with something this good. It's just great. They named the holiday Purim. They name it Purim. Why? Well, remember how Haman picked his lucky day. He picked his lucky day by rolling his favorite little spiritual dice. Okay, these little devices, they were his secret favorite weapon. He's so proud of them. He's rolling them. He's going to find how the gods are going to give him all that he wants, and he's going to be famous, and they're going to ensure the success of his plan. His precious little Purim, they're going to be what does it for him. These dice are called the pur. That's what they're called. In their language, they're called the pur. So he uses the pur. He picks his lucky day, but as it turns out, the reverse occurred. And his lucky day turns out to be their lucky day. So the Jewish people, in order to continue to mock him and rub it in his face for the whole rest of history, named their holiday Purim, after the pur, the little dice meant for their destruction, but used for their deliverance. Boom, take that, you Agagite, can't touch this. Na, 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 na. Oh, guys, I was set up. Like, I literally, like, bump, set, and you fail. Okay, da, na, 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 na. Nice. Yeah, Agagite. Right? The Jews of Persia celebrated Purim that year, and the Jewish people of the world haven't stopped celebrating it every year ever since. It was a complete reversal. Chapter 9:22, it says of this day, that day had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness, from mourning into a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and gladness. I'm telling you, I See Dead People has got nothing on the book of Esther. That is a twist. It's the craziest ending I think you'll ever read. And God does all of this without breaking any laws of nature. No seas are parted. No dead bodies are resurrected. No miraculous events are used in the making of this film. God just does it. His purposes are accomplished. His enemies are defeated. Take that, Satan, right? I mean, he can't be stopped. And you can tell, I love the ending of this story. I think it's amazing. And in exploring this story as we come to a close here in the story, I've just loved exploring what can be kind of, maybe if you've been around church, a sort of familiar story. But I've learned so much in diving into it, hopefully with fresh eyes. I hope you've learned some things along the way as we revisit it and hopefully understand what this book means for not only then, but for how God works in the world today and through all of history. And so I want to end today's message the way we've ended the rest of these in this series, with a few principles that I think we can glean about what this means for us. We've just got 2 principles this time, but I want to mention that these are not like neat and tidy application points, like with a crisp and obvious action step to improve your spiritual life today. And that's partially because I'm hesitant to make a story that's all about like genocide and revenge and sexual tension too applicable to our lives, right? That might end badly. But also, I think it's because biblical stories like this are meant to shape the way that we view the world. Meant to shape the way we view our place in the world and the way that God works. They're not really designed to be a how-to manual about how to pitch an idea to your boss and get him to say yes. Okay? So as we keep that in mind, that's the approach that we're thinking about with these principles. And the first principle I want to give you is mostly about how we view the Bible, how we approach the scriptures, what we're looking for. And the principle is this, that God is the hero of this story. He's the hero of this story. If you look back over Esther, it's vital that we recognize, as drawn as we are to the compelling characters, both their strength and their shadow side, the story really is just not about them. And you could say, what do I mean? I mean, isn't the book called Esther for a reason? How is God the hero of a story he's not even mentioned in? Well, first of all, I think he's a hero because he does all the heavy lifting. Orchestrating this story was the hard part, protecting his people, and he does all of that. But that's not the main reason he's the hero. I think the main reason he's the hero is because in the scripture, he's always the hero. In fact, he's the focal point. He's the whole point all the time. Whether he's mentioned or not, named or not, he's the focus. And understandably, we tend to get caught up in all the human stories and the human heroes, and that's normal. It's healthy. It's not even necessarily bad to learn from their behavior, like their courage or their faith. For instance, we could say, like, hey, Haman is narcissistic. Don't be like him. Esther is brave, be like her. Mordecai is decisive, be more like that. That's fine. But that can't be the main thing. Because these heroes are too full of issues to be the hero that we really need. God is the hero. And he uses different people in different times, in different ways. If you look at the story of the scriptures, you can see that Esther behaves very differently from Joseph, and from Ezra, and from Ruth, and Daniel, and Moses, and everyone else. All of these people are good in their own ways, and horribly flawed in others. And when you step back from the story, the sense that you're supposed to get is not that these individuals are themselves cool, but that God is up to something in history. It's okay to relate to the characters. There's a time for that. Seriously, VeggieTales has its place. It does. And my kids and I think all of us, benefit greatly from getting to see the lives of God's people recorded for us in both all of their fame and in their failure. It's not bad. But when we approach the scriptures, I would love us as a family to build up the habit of having the scriptures particularly elevate and primarily elevate our view of God. Not just to provide helpful moral anecdotes and parables. I love this quote from a pastor. He says, "Our own faithfulness can't ultimately be provoked via moralistic comparison." Again, like Esther is good, be good, and Haman is bad, don't be bad. That's not what will produce faithfulness ultimately. It will be provoked when we lift our eyes to see the faithfulness of our promise-keeping God. God is the hero of the story. And so if your daughter wants to dress up, for Halloween as Esther, that's fine. I'll be honest, I don't think you want that costume to be super historically accurate. But, it's fine. Esther's great. Okay? But never lose sight of the fact that the invisible and the unmistakable hero of the story is God himself. And he's no less at work today in your life than he was in Esther's. He's the same God. Which leads us to our final principle in the series. And it's this, that the cross is the ultimate reversal. The cross is the ultimate reversal. Because the story of Esther is epic, right? I mean, we saw how it's a story of historical roots that goes back to an ancient conflict between Israel and Amalek. But in many ways, it goes back even further than that. It's a story that begins in Genesis 3:15. Soon after humanity has fallen, they've been deceived by a serpent and sinned against God. And in that moment, the enemy, the serpent, looks like he's won. But it's in that moment that God made a promise, a prediction. What he says is that a child of this woman, one of her descendants, will come. And when he comes, this chosen one will crush the head of the enemy. That snake's head will be crushed. And the enemy that he's talking about was there for that prediction. He knows it's coming, right? And so what he sees in Persia is a moment of vulnerability. God's people are in exile. And if he can just get the right guy, a long-standing enemy of the Jewish people, just one guy into a position of power under this one manipulatable king, if he can get this one guy into power under this particular king at the right time, if he can just issue one edict through this one bad guy, then he stands a good chance of ruining God's chance of preserving the line of Israel and bringing forth this future promised child, this powerful descendant that God promised is going to destroy the enemy. So the enemy sees his chance and he takes it. He shoots his shot with Haman. But God, the true hero of the story, brushes away the attempted coup before it even begins. Easy as you please. He deftly arranges all the players, all the factors, all the coincidence, such that the enemy's agent Haman dies, and he dies on his own homemade revenge device. And the people of God are still celebrating that enemy's demise thousands of years later, because God made a promise about a snake crusher, and that promise could not fail. And it didn't. Because Esther, she provided rest or relief from the enemies of the people of God. says this in Esther chapter 9. Now the rest of the Jews who were in the king's provinces, they also gathered to defend their lives, and they got relief, rest, shalom from their enemies. That's an amazing moment that Esther brought. It was worth celebrating then. It's worth celebrating now. It was a big win. But it was a win that was always temporary. It was always temporary. More enemies will come, and they did come. Because Persia lost to Greece, and then Greece lost to Rome, and 100 other civilizations since then have risen and fallen. There will always be another enemy. Unless there can be someone who doesn't free us just from an enemy, but someone who frees us from the idea of enmity itself. Unless there could be someone who could free us not only from one particularly oppressive ruler, but from sin and death itself. A chosen one who could plant the seeds of a world where enemies themselves could become family through a particular form of radical grace. If a leader could lay the foundations of a world where there is no such thing as an enemy, because enmity and hatred and death and sin and selfishness, all of them are forever destroyed. A kingdom where peace and wholeness are the ruling ethos of the day. And because the line of Israel was preserved through a courageous but compromised and imperfect queen, because the line of Israel was preserved through this queen, the promise of God was fulfilled in a perfect king whose name is Jesus. And in his perfect life, in his sacrificial death, we see the greatest reversal in human history. We see the final end of enmity itself, not just one particular enemy. The greatest reversal occurs where our sin goes on his body, where our debt goes on his account, where our healing comes through his wounds. And when he rises from the dead, victorious over all enemies, then mourning becomes dancing. And sorrow becomes rejoicing, and graves become gardens, and enemies become daughters and sons of the king, because the child of the woman has crushed the head of the serpent. Because our God, who is the hero on every page of history, has come to make us his own. And he has done, yes. He's come to make us his own. He has made everything new. And he was the only one who could. And so the snake's head has been crushed. And the king has been victorious. And so we can say today that mourning can become dancing. Sorrow can become rejoicing. Graves become gardens. Because our God has made it possible. So would you stand with me at all of our locations? We want to sing of the fact that we have a God, the only one who could, the hero of all of history, has stepped in and said that he will give beauty for ashes.